Young Sheldon's most bizarre cameo gimmick won't fly in Georgie and Mandy's spinoff. The world of young Sheldon is already a peculiar one, packed with quirks, oddball humor, and the kind of cameos that often make viewers do a double take. From Sheldon's hyper-intelligent observations to the subtle nods to the original Big Bang Theory, the show has built a reputation for clever, occasionally weird humor. Yet even within that framework, one particular recurring gimmick, the show's most bizarre cameo device, stands out as both a triumph and a potential misstep for any future spin-offs, especially one centered around Georgie and Mandy. For longtime fans, the young Sheldon cameo formula has always walked a fine line between playful homage and outright absurdity. The show loves to drop guest stars or familiar faces into otherwise mundane settings, but there's a twist. Many of these appearances lean into deliberate awkwardness or self-referential humor. A prime example is the way older versions of characters, or famous figures connected to the Big Bang Theory universe, briefly pop in, sometimes interacting with a younger version of the familiar cast, sometimes existing entirely outside of continuity. This gimmick works within young Sheldon because the show is already framed as a child prodigy's perspective, making reality a little flexible. Sheldon's world is filtered through his genius and his family's often exasperated lens, so a cameo that bends reality, time, or logic feels almost natural. When a guest star shows up and behaves in a slightly cartoonish way, the audience instinctively accepts it. The cameo isn't meant to feel real. It's meant to amuse, surprise, and occasionally cause a ripple of fan theories. The issue, however, arises when trying to transplant that same approach to a spin-off focused on Georgie and Mandy. Unlike Sheldon, Georgie's story is more grounded. The narrative stakes are different. He's a teenager or young adult, depending on where the spin-off picks up, dealing with more relatable issues: school, romance, family dynamics, and the slow, sometimes painful process of figuring out who he is outside of the shadow of his genius brother. Mandy, similarly, exists in a world where humor is often derived from character development and situational comedy rather than outright surrealism. Imagine, then, the absurdity of Georgie encountering a cameo figure in the middle of a normal scene, someone dropping in, behaving outlandishly, and breaking the internal logic of the episode. For a show like Young Sheldon, this could be funny. For a Georgie and Mandy spinoff, it could be jarring, pulling viewers out of the story rather than drawing them in. The comedy in Georgie's world is more subtle, often character-driven, and relies heavily on the chemistry between the leads. Slapstick guest appearances, surreal celebrity insertions, or time-bending gimmicks risk feeling out of place. One of the most notorious examples of this cameo gimmick in Young Sheldon was the future you trope. In a handful of episodes, the show briefly imagined a future version of a character, sometimes voiced by a well-known actor, interacting with the present timeline. The scenes were visually simple, often just a close-up or voiceover, but the effect was bizarre. Suddenly, the present-day character was confronted with an exaggerated, alternate version of themselves, often providing commentary that bordered on meta-humor. Fans were divided. Some loved the audacity and creativity, while others questioned whether these moments fit the show's overall tone. It's easy to see why Georgie and Mandy wouldn't benefit from a similar approach. Their spin-off is expected to explore the everyday trials of growing up, relationships, and family obligations. Introducing a cameo that breaks temporal or narrative rules could derail the emotional authenticity the show needs to succeed. Georgie's humor is often rooted in embarrassment, awkward social situations, or his tendency to overthink things. Mandy's comedic strengths lie in her dry wit, pragmatism, and occasionally exasperated reactions to Georgie's antics. Insert a zany cameo out of nowhere, and the delicate balance of their chemistry could collapse. Moreover, the audience for Georgie and Mandy is likely overlapping but not identical to Young Sheldon's. Many viewers will tune in expecting a spin-off that maintains the heart of the original while expanding on unexplored corners of the BBT universe. They want grounded humor, relatable challenges, and a natural evolution of the characters they've grown attached to. If the show suddenly veers into meta-cameo territory, it risks alienating fans who are looking for warmth and character-driven comedy rather than absurdist, fourth-wall-breaking spectacle. There's also a continuity issue to consider. Young Sheldon exists almost as a standalone prequel, playing fast and loose with canon. Cameos can appear with minimal explanation because the timeline is flexible, and viewers generally forgive inconsistencies for the sake of humor. Georgie and Mandy, however, will likely operate closer to the continuity established in the Big Bang Theory. That means guest appearances must adhere to the established universe's rules, making any bizarre gimmick much harder to justify. Bringing in a future you type of cameo or a celebrity version of a character could feel like a misstep in world building. It would be difficult to reconcile with the more grounded, character-focused narrative the spin-off requires. The tonal difference between the two shows is stark. Young Sheldon thrives on exaggerated intellect and situational absurdity, often amplifying quirks to comic effect. Georgie and Mandy's spin-off, in contrast, is poised to highlight emotional growth, personal struggles, and the messy reality of young adulthood. A gimmick that works in the context of a child prodigy's lens, a filter that naturally exaggerates reality, doesn't translate well to a show where characters are expected to navigate believable challenges and relationships. That isn't to say cameos should be avoided entirely. Georgie and Mandy can absolutely feature guest stars, but these appearances must feel organic. Cameos could work as mentors, extended family members, or familiar faces who naturally fit into the story. The key is subtlety. A small wink or a shared joke works far better than a reality-bending spectacle. For example, a cameo of a former classmate or coworker could evoke nostalgia and humor without breaking the show's grounded tone. Audiences will appreciate these moments if they reinforce character development or narrative stakes rather than serve as a jarring spectacle. Ironically, the very thing that made the cameo gimmick so effective in Young Sheldon, its sheer bizarreness, is what makes it incompatible with Georgie and Mandy. The charm of watching Sheldon navigate the world through his unique intellect allows for cartoonish, unexpected humor. Georgie, by contrast, is a character whose humor is derived from relatable human flaws. Mandy's humor is similarly grounded. Bizarre cameos might overshadow these qualities, reducing their impact and potentially alienating viewers who tuned in for character-driven comedy. Ultimately, the spin-off needs to strike a careful balance between nostalgia and innovation. It must honor the original characters, explore new facets of their lives, and provide humor that feels earned rather than forced. A cameo gimmick lifted directly from Young Sheldon, especially one as surreal as a future self or celebrity meta-humor, risks undermining all three objectives. It would feel less like a natural extension of the characters' journeys and more like a cheap attempt at shock value. Instead, Georgie and Mandy should focus on moments that enhance character arcs, deepen relationships, and subtly reward longtime fans. A cameo could nod to the original show, but it should be clever, understated, and integrated into the storyline. Perhaps a background character from Big Bang Theory makes a cameo that prompts Georgie to reflect on his own life choices, or Mandy encounters someone whose appearance mirrors an old life lesson. These types of appearances preserve humor while respecting the show's more grounded tone. In conclusion, while Young Sheldon's most bizarre cameo gimmick has earned laughs and headlines, it won't translate well to a Georgie and Mandy spinoff. The surreal, meta, or time-bending nature of these appearances fits perfectly in a show about a child